Hello and welcome back to Friday Minis. Now, you may have heard of this thing before where in programming, print statements, statements that actually display something onto the console window, is slow, is inefficient. Now, I've heard this a lot, I've experienced it a fair few times myself, but I've never really gotten around to, taking a closer look at what sort of impact it actually has, as well as why there is such a problem in the first place. So today, let's delve a little bit deeper into this to not just understand why it's like that, but what we can do to, avoid this problem in the first place. So to start off with, I've written a small piece of Python code. So this will be our experiment setup. I've essentially written 3 different functions, each of which will actually handle the display of a set of numbers onto the console in a slightly different way. We'll start off the first of 3 functions, which simply uses a loop, generates those numbers, and then displays them. Let's take a look at how long this takes. To help us with that, I'm using a tool called cProfile, which will accurately measure what exactly is going on. And as you can see, the timing is not great. It takes a fair few seconds to, display all this text. And as you can see from the reports, most of the time is spent on the print statement. So this corroborates what we understand about print statements being inefficient. That's the bottleneck here, right? So I did a little bit of digging to understand why that is so, and as it turns out, it is simply an issue of blocking. The act of sending some text to the console and getting it to display takes some time. And what happens is that your program actually pauses, it actually waits for that entire process to complete. So if you call it like 20,000 times as I've done, then there's a lot of waiting involved. Your program is spending the vast majority of time just twiddling its thumbs, waiting for the console to do its thing. And that is the problem. Now, it must be said that this does not apply to every single console implementation. At least this is the naive, simple way of doing it. But there is nothing stopping a console program from buffering whatever input that you send to it. So that is fast, right? The moment your input goes into the buffer, it's basically done blocking. Your program can continue. So what this means is while the act of printing remains as slow as ever, it doesn't happen quite as often. All the information is consolidated before being displayed in one go. Of course, the disadvantage of doing things this way is we may have to wait some time before things are actually displayed on screen. So there is a trade-off here. Of course, I'm just using the standard Windows command line here, which does not have such a feature, at least not to my knowledge. So let's build the buffer ourselves. I still want to display all the numbers between 0 and 20,000, but this time I don't want to, just send everything straight through to the console. Instead, as I generate numbers, I'm going to just build all of those numbers onto a string. Now, even that has multiple approaches. I'm going to start off by doing an inefficient approach. I'm going to basically build the string by repeatedly concatenating to that string. Now, this approach is pretty widely discouraged. Reason being, generally strings are immutable. What that means is every time I do a concatenation, I'm not sort of tacking stuff onto an existing string, even though it appears like that. Instead, I'm essentially building a brand new string. So if I do that repeatedly in a loop, there's actually a lot of memory access going on, a lot of creation and destruction of objects, so it's not as efficient. However, we have at least one improvement, and that is we only have one print statement, not a repeated printing in a loop. So let's tweak the code a little bit. Let's tell the program to go ahead and profile my second function. And will you look at that? This is much faster. You can see the timing improvement. It's orders of magnitude faster. Again, because we don't have to wait for the console to print each line. Now, just for fun, I'm going to use a smarter way of generating the string. Instead of building the string with my bare hands using concatenation, I'm going to use the Python inbuilt join function. Now, because this is, purpose built, right, for doing something like this, I would assume, I know it's bad to assume, but I would assume that it is more efficient rather than having to build the string yourself. So what I'm doing is I'm generating a list of all the numbers, and then I'm using a join operation to bring everything together. I would assume that this is built in one fell swoop rather than having to, basically keep on rebuilding the string. Now, running this on the profiles doesn't actually bring about much difference. However, we can always make the differences more obvious by increasing the number of, numbers that we're going to generate. By increasing the number up to 200,000, now the difference becomes apparent. It takes absolutely forever to actually construct that string if we were to use concatenation, whereas the more efficient method barely breaks a sweat. And yes, while we are no longer repeating the print operation because there is enough text, it still takes a couple of seconds to complete. And interestingly, this is actually so inefficient that you would be better off just printing everything directly to the console. Yes, that's right, I ran the numbers on the original print method, and if you're displaying as many as 200,000 items, it actually takes a shorter amount of time to just print. So there you go, that's some food for thought. When we optimize for things, we have to, really think about every little bit of optimization there is. So there you go, hopefully this clears up a little bit of, the old saying that print is slow. Print isn't necessarily bad. As I've mentioned, certain consoles will make sure that, it doesn't block you for an unnecessary amount of time. But if you don't have that luxury, it's good to know something about how to work around this problem. That's all there is for this episode of Friday Minis. I hope you found this video useful. Until next time, you're watching 0612 TV with NERDfirst.net. Thank you very much for watching. If you like my work and are feeling generous, you can shoot me a one-time donation on PayPal or sign up for a recurring one on Patreon. Of course, you can simply like, comment, and subscribe. You know the deal. For more videos, links to my channel and a related playlist are on screen. Thank you for your support.